They're so invested in the membership.
Yeah,
They really are.
They really are. So yeah, it's tough, but it's good. Hi.
Cheers.
How's it going? Are you started already? Oh, okay. All right. Fair enough.
The answer is yes, I have.
It's not even Wednesday.
It's supposed to be nice. So if you could mention to the room that we're looking for a chair and ask if anyone is interested.
Yeah.
That's probably the best net we can throw out right now.
Okay, cool. All right, that's good. Yeah, I was going to speak to you about it. I'm happy to hold on a little bit if the responsibilities are going to be relatively light, but otherwise it may be better for you to find something new. So
I mean, it's not going to be a great deal of load, but just in terms of if I'm going to be finding a replacement for Montreal and then a replacement for
then it might be
Prague,
better.
and then
So, with my travel schedule, I don't think I can get to Montreal. Like London's easier because I'm 40 minutes that way. Montreal's a little bit more like 20 hours that way. So whatever. So yeah, it's just not good. It's going to be a little bit tough. And apologies, because if I was still in my previous role, this would have been an easy gig because I changed.
no worries.
Yeah.
Life happens.
That's true.
A lot of life happens.
A lot of life happens.
You're enough to my adapter.
Yeah.
My adapter. Yeah, okay.
Lauren.
But how things good?
Yes.
Busy?
Yeah, and especially right now, I can't think of things because I'm extraordinarily tired.
Yeah.
Falling asleep very easily, but then my body wakes up at like 6 or 7. It's like, I'm gonna sleep.
Tonight will be my hard night.
Did you guys just get in yesterday?
No, he's been here for a
I thought it
while.
was Friday.
Okay.
But
I got him.
It's going that way around the world.
like both last night and the night before, it's like I fell asleep getting ready for bed.
Yeah. Been there. Yeah. Oh well. But yes, I suppose it's the start of the week. But we've won one though. Good place. London's
Know
fun.
anything about Robert? Robert? Is he all right?
He's doing better. It's the best way to explain it. Like every complication that could have happened has happened.
What happened?
So
He's
he,
back in the hospital.
Oh, the start.
Robert's sorry.
Yeah. Oh gosh, that's sad.
so yeah, I mean he's been back in a couple of times for like
Yeah.
just unexpected infections or just you know a fever that might be an infection. They want to keep him there and make sure it's not. And
Yeah.
then he had some like extreme back pain. They had to go in and do like some touch-up surgery. But the good news is apparently he was feeling well enough to we have like a regular Friday night game night thing at his house. And
Nice.
so this past Friday, when he wasn't in London, it's like everyone who wasn't at the IETF was over there doing that. So he feels well enough to host that, which tells me at least he's not in excruciating pain that he was before. So fingers crossed, I hope that this is like the last thing to worry about.
Yeah.
Is he back in on it? Really? Double whammy.
Yeah, the timing of that was just
Oh,
really
really
crappy.
awful. Really awful. I mean, just unconscious. Unconscious.
Yeah.
Well, I hope everyone else is doing
Yeah, everybody else is good.
well, I sent him a message, I guess, to say that.
Robert?
Yeah, because he was great in Manu and stuff. So, yeah, like we didn't work together that much aside from that.
Right. Well, with luck, I would expect to see him on the show.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, we should, but it's all I need.
But I also expect to see him here, so.
That's right. So did I. And Gene too. Oh well.
Say hello to everyone for me. I think I'll see Nottingham on Thursday night or something. I think we have something planned. But then I don't know who else I'll run into.
Mark could all come off and all the art groups.
Yeah. Oh yeah, good point. I know, yeah, because I was running back and forth. But yeah, I'll just be here and then I'll be leaving. But I might pop by later on during the week. Yeah, and just to say hello to some people. So yeah, we did. But it's kind of it's nice. It's nice to see everyone.
What is the new gig for you?
It's web, primarily web. Okay. So yeah, so I relinquished
So you'll probably be a TPAC now, but not.
I relinquished my IETF responsibilities, kept my W3C responsibilities, and kind of threw myself back into web tech really. So I run a team. We're doing a lot of work in web standards and actually building.
Which technologies?
Good. Pardon?
Which technologies?
Actually, a lot at the moment in JavaScript frameworks and a lot in React. But I'm actually taking a bunch load of.
I mean, like in terms of W3.
Oh, W3. Oh, well, I'm looking at WebAuthn at the moment, though I'm not active in that. I'm on the AB, so I do all of my work on the AB.
Okay.
And I need to pay attention to verifiable claims as well for my sins. Otherwise, it's going to be a little bit more on the web platform side.
Okay.
Yeah.
See if I can,
Yeah, go ahead.
start it here.
Has anyone seen my co-chair? That would be great. I would love that.
We're not being pressed about voting on that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I've seen on the working group roster that it says actual start time. So I think they're doing a nice little survey to see when groups actually start. Welcome to NetVC, everyone. I'm Natasha, co-chair with Mo. I don't know where Mo is. I guess we should give him a couple more. Has anyone seen him? Okay, he's here. That's good. That's probably a thing I should know, right? Within 3 hours. That's good. That's good. I'm sure he's on his way. Right. Okay. Agendas on the screen. And where are we? Okay, cool. I'll send around the blue sheets. Do we have a scribe? One knowing soul who's offering to... Otherwise, if Mo was here, I'd quite happily do it myself. But until he gets here, I can't. Yay! Thank you. Thank you very much. And do we have a Jabber scribe? Thank you very much, Jonathan. Right, okay. Okay, all right. I will send around blue sheets. Awesome. Right, and let's give Mo a couple of minutes, and then we'll kick off, and I'll send around the agenda onto Jabber. Oh, he appears. No, you're good.
You're always reliable. City's transport.
Yeah, I wouldn't rely on the London Underground though. Right, okay, let me just send this around thingy. Okay, yeah, so welcome everyone to NetVC. Before we kick off, I'll just remind, we have a number of people on Meet Echo. If you are coming to the mic to speak, please speak your name clearly and keep your questions concise, clear, speak slowly, do as I say, not as I do. Also, if you are presenting today, please stand in the pink box, our favorite pink box. Please do that. This is the Notewell. If you've been here since this morning, you've probably seen it a few times already. If you have a problem with it, please let us know as soon as possible. Mo, is this the new Notewell? Great. Yeah, I think I got it wrong last time, so. Okay, cool. Thank you. Right. Administrative tasks. I sent around the blue sheets. Right. We have note takers. We have Jabber Scribe. Yes, I mentioned about remote attendees and presenters. And also, before we begin, I'm an outgoing chair, unfortunately, because my role has changed recently. If you are interested in being a chair of the NetVC group, please let myself or Mo know. Because it's not a very big job, actually. So if you're like sort of taking your first steps in chairing in IETF, please let us know. This is a good group to chair. A very interesting topic. Cool. All right. This is our agenda today. You should see it on the IETF agenda as well. Does anybody wish to agenda bash or add anything? So is agenda bashing is the same as adding anything? Great. Okay, I can see all enthusiastic and excited faces in the room. Cool. Milestones and status. Mo, do you want to give an overview of this at all?
So we updated the milestones from last time. If you recall, we were originally shooting for middle of 2017 on a lot of these milestones. And we most concerning, I guess, are the last three, getting an actual single codec candidate spec and reference code base progressed. That's the most important milestone by far in the working group, and so far we still don't have a single merged code base or candidate. So that's the milestone. That last meeting we agreed to push out till July, and I got to be honest that it seems very unlikely that in 4 months. Adam just asked, what's the likelihood of closing out this milestone in 4 months? I think it'll be a pretty tall order to get that closed out. I'd love to hear some thoughts about what people would like to see as the direction to try to progress that. And the other milestones, we'll finish up the requirements document. There's a few late changes to bring that in sync with other users of this document. There's other industry fora that are also using this document, and so synchronizing between those two requirements, those two sets of requirements, is probably important for us. But hopefully that synchronization can happen within the next few weeks, and we'll get that hopefully published by April. And then the final milestone for a storage format or container binding hasn't had any work started on it, but that's really kind of a moot issue if we don't address the codec spec and reference implementation. So we'll talk a little bit more about those and about what course the work group would like to see to try to resolve that after the presentations. And today would probably be a short session. We don't have a DALA update, so that was dropped off the agenda if you were looking at the first version. So we'll finish up by 5 o'clock today at the latest, and maybe even a little bit earlier because the first two topics will probably be light.
Great, thank you very much. London has some great beer, so finishing early is good. Actually, do you have another session after this? Or maybe not. You have to wait till you can drink in the sessions. Some people do. Okay, all right. Let's move on. Why aren't you going? Right, we've got Thomas is on the agenda. Thomas, you're online, aren't you? Are you able to present on over Meet Echo? Is he up?
Can you come up to the queue?
Yeah. Is there a big red button? Oh, I love this. This is the best bit.
Hello. Does my audio sound okay?
Oh, you're a little bit it's a little bit choppy, actually. I don't know if it's your mic.
Try to keep talking, Thomas.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
If this doesn't work, I'll try one more time. That is.
I'm glad this is not the audio codec working group. Those chairs should be fired.
Give him one more opportunity, otherwise we can move on and see if we can get to that afterwards.
And Thomas, I don't know if you can hear me, but one other thing you may want to try is just try muting your video. I don't know if it's a packet loss issue or what, but you can maybe just try turning off your video, see if you can just get audio through. If you can even hear me. Oh, there it goes again.
Should we move on? Come back?
Let's just give it 1 more minute. It's there we go.
All right. Am I good now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. All right. Hi, I'm Thomas from Mozilla. I have a very short update on draft IETF Netvc testing. This draft has not had any updates since the last meeting. So this is just really to state its current status. Next slide. Yeah, no updates. This is relatively stable at this point. The only thing I thought I'd point out is that I've been running, people are continuously using this draft to do testing. I have an example results on the next slide. Like we've, for people who've been, testing AV1 on this, the current AV1 scores are as follows. The only issue that has ever come up during using this test for AV1 is that the AV1 code base has gotten slower and slower and slower. So our current Objective 1 fast test set is no longer very fast. It's very slow. So I think this result actually does not use the very slowest AV1 speed to test with. Other than that, there have been no major issues with it. I think last meeting we decided to hold this for changes. I don't really have a comment if we still need, we have not actually made any changes. So I don't know if we still want to keep on holding it in perpetual amendment or not. That would be my only question.
So Mo's a question as an individual. First of all, before closing the draft topic, there's not a VMAF on here. And I thought there was some discussion a while back about perhaps dropping MSSIM in favor of just SM. Was that ever resolved, or is that still open?
So one thing to potentially change here is that Netflix has created a updated version of VMAF called, I think they call it harmonic VMAF, which is basically a different way of combining the frame scores. I think that version resolves some issues that the old VMAF had in regards to the old VMAF saturating and kind of producing unreasonable numbers at some of the rates we test. The draft has not been updated to address that. That might be something we'd want to fix before closing it.
Does the testing infrastructure already have the new VMAF computing, or it doesn't?
It does not.
It does not. Okay, so there needs to be test infrastructure and draft updates to get VMAF correct. Okay. And then what about the MSSIM versus SSIM issue?
That was an old issue. There's actually, I think, fast SM versus MSSIM. The draft has been updated to drop fast SM entirely in favor of MSSIM.
Okay, so we're still looking at both multi-scale and regular SM results together, and
yes,
and that's expected.
That they produce very different results and measure different things. It's still not clear on which one is better. I mean, but the testing draft basically says if you see large discrepancies between the two, you should verify the results with subjective testing instead to figure out which one is giving you a better answer for your particular tool. I think that remains the best advice.
So after the VMAF update, what does the group think about closing the document instead of leaving it open if there's little chance that it's going to change too much more? It's been pretty stable for a while. Does anyone have an opinion of whether we should close or leave it open? By close, I mean publish as a finished spec. Thomas, as the editor, what's your view? What's your recommendation?
I guess if we're going to go fix VMAF, we can't close it now. So maybe just keep it open until next meeting and then figure it out then.
Okay.
There's pretty much no other unresolved issues as far as I know.
Tim?
Yeah, this is Tim Terryberry from Mozilla. So if I remember correctly, the one thing that we were potentially thinking of adding to this was some tests specifically for rate control. And while that might still ultimately be nice, I don't think there's a reason to keep holding the document forever for that. Nobody's going to do it. So I think we can go ahead and publish. We could even potentially publish without having a meeting.
Yeah, we certainly don't need to meet just to agree to publish a document. So if everyone feels strongly that we should not publish it, I'd say speak up now in the room or speak up on the list. Because otherwise, I think the recommendation from the editor is going to be to go ahead and close this out and publish it after correcting the VMAF implementation. Say again?
Jonathan Lennox, does this already have working group last call? Or do you mean go to working group last call?
I don't think we ever did a working group last call because we didn't decide to publish it.
Well,
So-
I mean, you can do a working group last call and still park it, so I'd say do a working group last call
Yeah,
regardless.
I think we didn't, I think we never did it last call because it was not intended to be parked. It was intended to keep changing, so, but yeah, we'll certainly do at least probably a good long last call because people probably had their eyes off of it for a while. Okay, so for the notes, we'll leave the document open now, but there's going to be another revision, right, Thomas? And we'll get a revision with the VMAF corrected. And then
Yep.
we'll initiate a working group last call after that revision, barring any other feedback from the list about keeping it open.
Sounds good to me.
And then one other comment as an individual, not related to the document, but just as this is a tool to help evaluate results. Certainly when all the metrics agree, it's a no-brainer that, something is consistent and better. But when you say that there's, divergence of the metrics, or not even divergence, but, significant differences between the metrics, is it useful to try to categorize that on specific content so we can start getting some intuition about when some of the metrics should be ignored or taken with a grain of salt? Do we think that it's possible to get some insight with that by looking at all the different test clips where they diverge and seeing if there's a pattern there? We can help to guide further testing, say, this class of content is most likely poor for SSIM or very good for VMAF. Is that something worth trying to do?
We could do that. We would need actually to compare it to subjective results in order to get a good correlation there. We have done that, but only for, I think there's been a couple of loop filter tools that people have done the subjective tests on, and that's about it. So we could probably reach a conclusion in regards to the types of loop filters that we tested. Though other tools would be harder because people haven't done subjective tests of them.
Okay. Some kind of guidance like that may be nice for codec developers, because, just looking at a, smorgasbord of metrics, can sometimes be daunting. And if they disagree, it's a lot better if we can give some concrete guidance about when they're likely to disagree and which ones are likely to prevail for certain classes of content.
Yeah, I've also considered, I forget what actually the current state of the document is with regards to this, but, considering defining a subset of the metrics, you could actually define them all in a document, but if we could give, a priority to some or eliminate some that are generally not useful. Like if you look at my picture here, the CB and CR scores are entirely redundant with CIEDE. And in general, the APSNR scores are mostly redundant with PSNR. So they may be useful for testing some things, but you could drop them off the default ones to look at.
Let's move on.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much, Thomas.
Thank you.
We'll move on to our next agenda item. I don't know why this isn't playing ball, but it's here. We have the XVC video codecs. Jonathan, you're here. Great.
We're doing did I mess up the agenda?
Oh, so are we going for 4 first? Steiner, you up for 4? Okay, good. All right, so we'll do our Thor AV1 update and comparisons first. You have a clicker if you want. It should work. Should.
Okay, I'm Stan Mitskogen. So I will be pretty short as well. I don't have much to update on actually. So for Thor, not much has happened since the last time we met. No new tools added. The only changes have been some optimizations for the CDEF, the loop filter, and a few bug fixes. And the reason why there hasn't been much development is that most of the work since last time has been to the AV1 codec, which has got more traction. But Thor is fairly complete in the sense that it supports, I think, everything which is in the requirements. So what's missing is really just a few nice to have features, like the support for the dollar entropy coder has not yet been completed. And also, I think the codec lacks some good tools for screen content. So what we have now is not a complete merge of Dala and Thor, but it's a fairly simple codec performing pretty similar to H.265, I think, but should be less complex. And I also have, it doesn't fit the page quite right, but okay. As for AV1, the spec is frozen in quotation marks. I think there's quite a lot of updates going on really now, small changes, but at least no new tools are allowed. And as I said, there's a lot going on in the repository, but it's only small changes. And still some bug fixing going on. Last time I gave a comparison. I showed the history, compression history of AV1 over the past 2 years and also the complexities. I'll go through that again with an update. I have some numbers showing the improvements over VP9, or actually it's over what AV1 was like in July 2016, which is roughly the same as VP9. So we have a PSNR-Y BDR gain of 29%, and the other metrics are roughly the same. Yeah, so I will show two graphs like I did last time. Results from RV compressed yet with the objective one fast test set. And since the last meeting, there's about 5% BDR improvement, and the complexity has increased threefold. And I only collected numbers for the low delay configuration. So this is the compression history, starting in July 2016 on the left. Been a bit up and down, and the latest bump in February this year is probably just because I sampled at a bad time. But it's almost 30%, and that's what the revised goal was. We started out, I think, like 40 or 50% gain, but it's got more realistic, and we got 30%. As for the complexity history, you should note that the y-axis here is logarithmic. So it started out at 20 frames per minute, something like that. And now we are at, well, very slow.
Well, you might see more if you use that.
Well,
It's a brighter screen as well.
yeah.
Better quality.
That's easier. So I started the runs in RV compressed jets almost 2 weeks ago, and they completed this morning. And this is using the fast test sequence set. But it has been increasing slightly over the recent months, but I think it hasn't been much a priority to make it practical. So I guess the question remains that if it's possible to get it practical. we've done some internal testing, and where H.265 and AV1 overlap, there is at least the same order of magnitude complexity. So the main difference perhaps between AV1 and H.264 complexity-wise is that if you throw more CPU at AV1, you get more compression. But if you throw a lot of CPU at H.264, compression will stop. You won't get that much more. So that's everything I had. Certainly less than 20 minutes.
Great, thank you. Any questions? Let's go.
So
ahead.
Stefan Wenger, let me ask a slightly provocative question. What's the relationship between Thor and AV1?
Sorry, could you repeat that?
What is the relationship between Thor and AV1?
Okay. When the Alliance of Open Media was formed, there was 3 proposals: VP9, Thor, and Dala. And VP9 was chosen with some tools from both Thor and Dala. So AV1 is basically VP9 with some tools from Thor and Dala. And some of the development work that went into AV1 has gone back into Thor.
So you plan to keep Thor as a standalone codec alive as a candidate for here, or are we going to rubber stamp AV1 at the end? I mean, that's, everyone knows.
I guess the
plan,
future of Thor depends on what this group decides
Okay.
to do.
Yeah, thank you, Stefan, for the important question. I think let's have that question brought up again after the XVC discussion, because I think we need to decide as a group what's the best way forward. To remind everyone, the intended output of this group was a single codec, and hopefully something that's practical and implementable by web browsers for WebRTC usage. So for real-time, interactive, two-way encoding and decoding, as Steiner shows here, AV1 theoretically could probably fit that bill, although we don't have a proposal from someone representing the Alliance officially to come in here and do that. But right now, the current practical implementations of AV1 are nowhere near that. What would you say is the current gap, Steiner, between making it practical at real-time speeds and getting compression much, much better than H.264? What's the current gap?
From H.264?
Speed-wise, yes. To make it practical at real-time.
H.264 is pretty fast. So,
well, let's just say absolute speed, not relative speed. To get a 30 frames per second implementation in a web browser, at reasonable resolutions, at 720p, reasonable, not like 4K, Super HD.
For AV1 currently, there aren't any implementations doing that that I know of. For Thor, I guess it's possible with if you can use a few cores on a standard computer.
Mm-hmm. So your current graph is frames per minute, right?
Yeah.
For AV1. So
right.
We're not even talking about anywhere near. We're at least 2 orders of magnitude off of real-time encoding, right? But with Thor, you had near real-time encoding.
Yeah. It's certainly possible to get real-time encoding with Thor. That we know, but for AV1, it's not proven yet that you can do that. So it will probably take some time until implementations can actually do that. I would also like to mention that I also had a run with. I checked that the revision that Jonathan was using as a reference. I picked a bad reference apparently in February, so I wanted to make sure that Jonathan didn't pick a bad one. And since the 2nd of February, which was the reference he used, there's a 2% gain. So the revision he picked seems to be okay. Okay, shall we move on to Jonathan?
Yes, Jonathan, you're up. XVC video codec. Right, let me move over to the slides. Brilliant. Is this working? Fantastic. Right, here we go.
Okay, thank you very much. So I will be presenting about the XVC video codec. My name is Jonathan, and I work for Davidion. So this is a new proposal to this group, and this is the first time we're presenting it. And I kind of hope it's not too late to bring in new stuff. But what I want to emphasize here is that it's not just a new piece of technology that we're bringing in, it's also representing a slightly different mindset for developing, and I'll go into that in the beginning of the presentation. So what I will be presenting today is just briefly about what is XVC, about the design philosophy, very briefly about the technology, and then I'll go into more details about something that we call restriction flags and how that helps us to do version handling, and I'll describe a bit about that, and also a few words about how XVC could be used in real-time applications, and present some results, and then round off with discussing why we think XVC would be a good candidate for the Netvc working group. So what is XVC? It's a next generation video codec which we have developed, which was released in its first version last year, which we claim that it brings better compression performance than all other codecs. It's developed by my company. We have made the source code publicly available, and we have a commercial license for it, which covers both the software and the patents of the codec. And we're also exploring the possibility of defining a royalty-free baseline profile of XVC. And we have a well-defined framework for how to handle evolution of the codec, how to bring in new versions of the codec, and I'll go into more details of that. We also have focused very much on making sure that our implementation, especially on the decoder side, is efficient and is capable of being quickly brought to practical applications to use it commercially. We have a few demos of that, and there's a demo on our webpage where we're actually running the decoder in JavaScript, so that you see that the decoding process itself is very lightweight. So about the design philosophy for the XVC codec, when we have developed this codec, we have made our focus has been on using the best available technology, and not really caring about the licensing or patent situation around the different tools that we put into the codec. We only remove stuff or design our own stuff if we really need to. If there is a request to not use a specific coding tool, so that means we can use the very best compression technologies, and get the best performance, and only if we run into problems with that, we will step down and use some alternative or do some design around. So here's a very simple, extremely simplified scale that if you have if you want something which is really high performance, you also have to be prepared that there's a high risk that there are patents surrounding it, or patents on that technology. While in the other end of the scale, if you want to be really sure that you are using something that is not patent encumbered, then you have to be prepared that it's probably not as good performance. So that's a simplified view of the scale, and we'd like to see. I mean, XVC is really on this end of the scale, and if you want to be in that end, you probably should use something for which all the patents have expired already. So like MPEG-2 video or something, and then you can speculate where other codecs would end up in this scale. Depending on their performance and the risk when it comes to IPR or burden when it comes to IPR. Briefly about the technology, in the first version that we released, we isolated 62 different coding tools. Much of the common pieces that you see in modern video codecs is very similar in XVC and in other codecs. Compared to HEVC, for example, we have a bit more advanced splitting of blocks for prediction and for transform and non-square transforms and so on. And in the current version that we are working on right now, which we haven't released yet, we add quite a bit more of those advanced features, so to say, like cross-component prediction or affine motion prediction or local illumination compensation and so on. And I talk about coding tools like separate pieces of technology, separate processing steps that you can isolate from each other. And that's actually also how we have developed it and implemented it in the reference software. We have this concept of restriction flags. So each of these different tools can be turned off via control information in the bitstream itself. So we isolate the different pieces of the codec so that you can decide which pieces you want to use. And if you run into problems with one piece of technology, it can be disabled in the bitstream, and that part of the code will no longer be utilized. And so there has to be a fallback method for each of these different tools and each of these different restriction flags. And here's a simple example for intraplanar prediction. If that tool is turned off, then we go into this if clause and we'll just replace that prediction mode with DC prediction instead. And we have this for every of these 76 tools. We have a fallback solution. This is very simple, but some of them are a bit more advanced because they relate to signaling, and you have to do several modifications in the code to make them work well. But this is one of the simplest ones. On average, each of these different tools bring less than 1% compression performance. So turning a few of them off actually doesn't have to hurt the performance very much.
Okay. So now from the floor mic virtually, I have a question about the selection of the tools that controlled by the flag. Did you design those because of what you suspected may be areas that may be patented, or purely based on technology and based on what you thought was the right breakdown of the components of the codec?
That's a good question. What we've tried to do is isolate as small pieces as possible, which is still practical to implement. So we want to have as many flags as you can have, while still not causing too much trouble in the code, so to say. So that's the reasoning. We want to make every piece so that you can turn off every piece of the code, and ideally as small proportion as possible. Is that answering your question?
Yeah, that makes sense. So it's not based on IPR or technology. It's basically whatever is practical to separate, you separate,
Yes.
just to have
Yes.
the most modular stack available.
Yeah. So some of these flags might not make very much sense. We have one flag which turns off by prediction altogether, and that is something which hurts performance, and maybe it doesn't. It's not a tool which is actually at risk from an IPR perspective, because that's very old technology. So, but most of them are for small pieces that you really want to be able to turn them off. What I wanted to talk about also is how we use these restriction flags to enable a evolution of the codec and versioning of the codec. So all bitstreams, all XVC bitstreams contain a indication of an XVC major version and an XVC minor version, where the major version represents new pieces of technology. If you increase the major version, that means you have added new tools to the codec, while the minor version represents reduction in number of tools. When when you say this tool should no longer be available in the codec. So I will disable this via the restriction flag, and you make the codec smaller. So we have separated these two, which makes it possible to control how the codec evolves over time. And it's actually and it's the reference software which defines which versions are valid at any point in time. So making this, there are two aspects that we need to take into account. It's the bitstream upgrade. If you have legacy bitstreams of an XVC version, you might, at some point, if they are using a tool that you're no longer allowed to use, then you have to rewrite them or re-encode them. And that's something, if you are considering a VOD service or OTT applications, you might want to re-encode your bitstreams, or depending on what the tool is that you have turned off, it might be just rewriting the syntax, or if it's a more central piece, you might actually have to do a full re-encoding. But on the other hand, if you do that, you might be able to get better performance because the codec has evolved since you first created the bitstream. So you might be able to compress it more efficiently. And then the other side of it is the client upgrade. So if a new major version is released with new tools in the XVC codec, then the clients needs to be updated to support that new version. So during a period of time, there will be support for two different versions. Two different versions of decoders will be allowed, but at some point in time, you would want all decoders to be updated to support the new version. And I will demonstrate how this is working in practice on this timeline. So if we have, so this is one of the reasons why we want the codec to evolve over time is because of the patent situation, and because we have seen how difficult it can be for patent encumbered codecs to become deployed due to patent trolls and unclear licensing situations and so on. And so if there is a report of a problem related to a piece of technology, and we determine that this tool can no longer be used in the codec, then there is a new minor version released. So quickly after it has been determined that this tool cannot be used because there is a patent which is in conflict with the license of XVC. Then after we have made that minor version released, we can start exploring what would be a better approach to do something similar, or how can you replace this technology with something else, so that at some point in time we have to say, okay, you can no longer be using the 1.0 definition of the XVC codec because it included technology which will not be, which is not possible to license, basically. But later on, you will have a new version with new tools, and in that version, you can have new technology which might be related to this specific problem, and also additions of other types, which makes the codec again better than it was in XVC 1.0. And after still some more time, you would say that at this point in time, we expect all decoders to support this new version. And what that means in terms of, from a bitstream perspective, I've tried to draw these different colors to indicate during which period of time a specific version of a bitstream will be valid. You see that the version 1 bitstream is valid until the point where support for 1.0 is removed from the reference decoder. But there is an overlap. So if you want to do re-encoding of your bitstreams or rewriting of your bitstreams, you can do that during this period. And bitstream from version 1.1 will be valid over that period, and also afterwards when the 2.0 has been released, and you see that there is no end to when those bit streams are valid. Unless there's a problem identified in 1.1, those bit streams will be okay forever, kind of. When it comes to and you see the version 2.0 bit streams starts to be valid as soon as the new major version of XVC is released. Looking at it from a perspective of encoders and decoders, you will have an overlapping period during which the encoders need to be upgraded. So, but I've done it within quotation mark because this upgrade is a very simple thing. This is just disabling something which is a tool which should no longer be used. So this is typically just a configuration thing that you would do on your encoder to make sure that this specific feature should not be used anymore. But then over here you have the upgrade of the decoder, and that requires a new installation of a new version of the decoder. So that's pushing out a new software to the client. But there's for both of these, there's an overlapping period of time where you can perform this action. And you can see that you might introduce more versions of the codec. This is kind of the general case where you don't make the codec smaller, you just make it bigger and add new features. Then you can keep your old bit streams will be a subset of these new versions. So that's about the version handling. I have one slide about XVC in the WebRTC scenario where this is not something we have been working specifically with, but having these restriction flags and these isolated pieces of technology opens up for an opportunity to kind of determine the tool set to use based on the capabilities or the scenario that you want to use them for. So you can open up for a negotiation of the tool set for each session to be different. And you can also, in that scenario, take into account the patent situation, the IPR situation. If you want to do a royalty-free session, you can explore what's the current situation around these tools, and you can even do it based on your locality or where you are in the world to use different tool sets for different sessions. When it comes to results, we have been running XVC with the test conditions and the test sequences from the testing draft, and used this RV compressed jet framework to generate results, and we think the results look really promising. We have quite significant gains relative to HM, HEVC, but also quite large gains compared to AV1. And I included one figure here as an example that you'll see XVC being better than the other codecs. And then my final slide. So we bring XVC here as a candidate for Netvc. We believe that it's well positioned to meet the objectives of this working group, that in sense that it's a competitive codec. In terms of performance, it's better than everything else we have seen. It can be used in web applications. We have demonstrated that the decoder is really lightweight. What we haven't worked with is developing fast speed modes for fast encoding. So that's something that needs to be evaluated more, I would say. But and then for the third bullet here, we believe we have a good framework for the licensing and IPR situation, which would meet this objective. And that's it. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much for that and a well put together presentation. That's great. Does anybody have any questions? A new candidate codec, there must be questions.
Tim, you're not curious?
Tim Terryberry from Mozilla. Can you go back to your slide on the risk scale?
Slide 6.
Yeah, anywhere in there is fine.
Yeah, I'll go.
Yep, 6.
So your contention is that picking tools that are high performance versus picking tools that are old and low performance is one way to mitigate risk, and I agree with you, that's one way to mitigate risk, right? So there are other ways to mitigate risk, such as for example, paying a bunch of money to lawyers and doing a bunch of work, or getting a bunch of other companies who hold IPR to agree to license it under, royalty-free terms, right? So just to be clear here that you have not done either of those other two things. You have solely focused your strategy on mitigating risk in the future by saying we can shut things off.
Yes.
Okay. So
It's actually worse. These guys plan to make some money on it themselves at some point for the high operation points. Nothing wrong with that, but that's true, right?
Yes. Sure.
right. So that is another point that we'll get to in a little bit. But I think at least from our perspective, like I think that would be an okay strategy if I lived in a world where past damages did not exist. And the problem is that I ship a few 100 million copies of Firefox every 6 weeks. And if I've been deploying your codec for a few months, that's an awful lot of past damages that I've racked up if there's a problem that we just didn't know about and hadn't shut off yet. So I think in order to actually be widely deployable, you need to do some of that other risk mitigation stuff up front.
Yeah, well, I think one of the reasons why we bring this proposal here is because I think a group like this is a good place to actually explore the patent situation and send out requests for patent declarations to determine what is the real patent situation along this codec.
And I agree that may turn up some problems, but if I can translate that for you, it sounds like what you're asking is for us to do all the work to guarantee that this is royalty free, which maybe if this is compelling enough, then that might be worth investing in, but that's a decision I think that the group has to make. I think the other question is you've talked about the possibility of there being a royalty-free baseline. So have you actually filed an IPR declaration and agreed to license any of your technology on a royalty-free basis?
I'm not sure I understand. Filed to this group?
I don't know to what extent you're familiar with the patent policy here right now. You're under no obligation to do anything like this at this point. Yeah, you haven't shown a draft or anything. I mean, you're here really early in the process. So, Tim, don't push it too hard for a newcomer.
I mean, if the answer was yes, then that'd be easy. Yeah. But yeah, so I mean, but the question is if there are things that you don't want to contribute on a royalty-free basis, then we would have to take those out of the codec, at least in terms of what I think the working group would be willing to standardize. And essentially, like the only thing I think that we are interested under the current charter would be that royalty-free baseline. Like if you want to hold out those other things, like okay, but then you have to go reevaluate what's the performance going to be if we take all of those things out. And I think like having some kind of notion of how much that would affect the performance would be important for making a decision on how useful a candidate this is. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm just, I'm not completely familiar with I mean, I haven't been active in this group, but my understanding was that the focus of this group is not entirely on royalty-free. It doesn't have to be only royalty-free, which is considered in this group. Is that wrong understanding? Or?
So to clarify, the charter doesn't rule out anything that could be royalty bearing, but it would have to show good evidence that there is good justification for including that technology. So, if the compression gain was very significant and the royalties were very reasonable, maybe that would merit consideration by the group. But if the compression gain is minimal and the royalties are in line with, say, for example, the situation with other codecs today, other leading edge codecs today, then there would be no point in the group considering that. So we don't want anything worse than HEVC or even similar to HEVC risk-wise.
Yeah, I mean, if you actually go read the charter, like there is a section towards the end where it says like we should follow the preference specified in BCP 79 to prefer royalty-free technologies. We can't actually write in a charter that things must be royalty-free because that's not a determination that the IETF can make. Like essentially, that's only a determination that can be made in a courtroom under the current legal system in the U.S. at least, and probably many other jurisdictions as well, right? But different members of this group probably have different preferences over what would be an acceptable level of licensing. Speaking as someone who distributes copies for free in an open source manner, which means we want other people to be able to distribute copies of our software for free. I think the only acceptable licensing to us would be none. But as Mo mentioned, no money. Yes. Let me phrase that more accurately. But yeah, as Mo said, other people may have different thresholds over what they view as acceptable based on their business models. And that's a debate the working group can have, but there's some pretty strong preferences already expressed in the charter.
Cool, thank you. Thomas has been patient on the queue online.
Yes,
so
I will give the mic and let somebody else talk.
Okay, cool. Thomas, you're up.
Hey, I just had a brief question. I was actually very happy that with your results slides. I think you did a good job in following the testing draft procedure. I was actually curious if you had any comments regarding the testing draft and how you felt it worked for XVC, and whether. And I was also curious, given your very good results, if you had any ideas what in XVC gave you the really good results. Like, did you have some special coding tools that no one else did? Or was it just the fact that a codec is more than the sum of its parts? I guess that was a lot of questions at once. So.
Yeah, I mean, when we generated our results, we used the Oracle PressJet framework, which was a very, very nice framework to work with. We have done testing with other pieces or other coding settings or other test sequences. We see some quite divergence in some specific sequences stand out. You will have, I mean, I report the average numbers for the categories here, where XVC is clearly better than AV1 for everything except the screen content. But there are individual sequences where AV1 could be better than XVC. I think there are at least a couple of them. But we also see a bit of difference depending on which metric we're looking at. We try to align as much as possible, but I don't think I don't have any specific comment on the test conditions. That was your first question, right?
Yeah.
When it comes to what is actually bringing the performance gains, I don't have enough insight into AV1 to comment on that. Compared to HM or HEVC, it's much easier to. I had this list. Many of all of these features, I would say. Oh, sorry. Skip through it. This list. These are features which are not present in HEVC, and we had there's stuff in version 1 as well when it comes to these non-square partitioning and non-square transforms, which is not where there is anything corresponding in HEVC. So that's where we see the performance benefit.
Okay. I had one other question before I slip some more in the line. Did you do your testing with version 2.0 or 1.0?
So the numbers reported are with all these tools included.
Okay. And is that the current code base on GitHub version 2.0 or is it version 1?
So in our GitHub repository, we have the master branch which represent version 1, and then we have the dev branch which is targeting version 2, but we haven't released version 2 yet. So that's still work in progress. I call it version 2 in the slide, but it's not really. We haven't determined exactly which tools will be in there.
Okay, thanks.
Hi, Ben Schwartz. I just wonder, I wanted to ask how you imagine mapping what seems like it might be a really highly dynamic codec that changes fairly frequently over time into IETF RFCs, which generally don't change very frequently.
That's a very good question. I would think that probably IETF might be more agile than other standardization organizations in terms of revising and updating specifications. But I don't know how. I mean, if it becomes too often that you have to revise it, it wouldn't be good. But we don't envision that. We think that it will be only as rarely as possible that you would have to remove something, and making these new additions would also be, I mean, with a reasonable time frame, so that you can get this update in a good.
So from the chair's view, I don't think there would necessarily be a technical problem. I mean, we have plenty of working groups that have lived for probably too long, so I don't see a technical problem with having a rolling technology coming in on a monthly or semi-monthly basis. I don't think it's too big of a deal.
That your company's website lists 60 days as the notification period from a change, and also reserves change control to the corporation.
So yeah, the 60 days is how quickly we have said that we will guarantee that we can turn off something if there is a detection of the technology that we cannot use. We'll say that we make sure it's not used within 60 days, from our perspective.
Colin Jennings. One of the most interesting things about this idea to me is the ability to turn on and off tools, and that you got that to work with a fairly modern and obviously complex codec. And I do wonder if that's one of the big takeaways this working group should take on that idea. One of the reasons I like that type of idea is right now I'm involved with lawyers from various companies in arguments about whether a patent is valid or not, or whether a patent is obvious or not. And it's a very different thing. And some people think, oh yeah, that was obvious at that time, and many other people don't. And this would allow different companies to actually choose different settings on whether they think about certain things like that in certain cases. So that's one comment. Another comment, I think that patent lawsuits over codecs happen for a lot of different reasons, often blocking markets by large players and things like that. But often when they are purely to maximize monetary somebody's trying to make a bunch of money for their IPR, when it's just a money case, not a sort of strategy case at hand, typically the optimal strategy seems to be, for the most part, to wait until, within a few years of the expiry of the patent before any of the lawsuits start. So often the discovery that there's a problem in something may be many, many years after it was being used. That's it, thanks.
Hi, Wallace John. I'm curious about this process you imagine, how the experience has been with practicing that process. Because last time I ran into a lawyer, or no, not a lawyer, but someone who talked about patents, his statement was more or less, I have patents in your technology. Full stop. And I asked, oh, okay, which technology? What is patented? Which bit is patented? That's your problem. So have you actually had experience with resolving a matter like this in 60 days?
So far, I mean, we released the first version in September last year, and we haven't had any report of using any technology that would be patented by someone.
Thank you.
Harald, I have had some experience in this field.
Name, please.
The situation is not quite as bad as it used to be, say, 10 years ago. In many countries, Stefan Wenger, in many countries, let's say patent complaints have to be nowadays fairly specific, right? So to speak more broadly, I think the addition of a tool that post-standard setting reactively allows you to selectively throw away in the standards domain that one nasty tool which that stupid troll across the street is asserting against the world. That's a useful tool. That's, I think, what Cullen was going after. I went after that too in MPEG about 2 years ago or so. It's a useful tool. Whether it is technically doable is another question. In video codec, some people will tell you it's quite hard because of the synergy effect between those various tools that are sitting there. It's not that easy to compartmentalize. However, if such a tool were available, I think the standards groups would have a tool that would allow them to react in a somewhat backward compatible way still to the threat of certain trolls, and that hopefully would discourage those trolls. So that's the idea behind proposals like this. It's not a bad idea. Whether it works in practice, I don't know.
I like the idea. That's why I was curious about whether it has been practiced.
There is also, though, it's also easy to overdo that. For those who were working on video codecs may remember H.263, and it's, well, they were running out of letters for the various annexes for the optional tools at the end, right? The end result was that, after the fact profiling or not, the end result was that video conferencing systems spoke baseline or pretty close to baseline as long as when interoperability was a question at all. Yeah, when cross-vendor interoperability was in play. Of course, within one vendor, everyone does whatever one does. But other than that, they were just falling back to baseline for this optional tools that you add on top of a baseline. This is a dial-down mechanism here. Dial-down mechanism maybe have a better choice. Yeah, it's mandatory to implement everything except when there's kind of an industry consensus to switch something off because there's this one troll with too much money who makes a nuisance out of himself. So yeah, there is an option here. It may work. Whether we can get, assuming that this group would want something like that, assuming we are not rubber stamping AV1, which doesn't have that and which is frozen bitstream and whatever, right? Then the question is, can we get the granularity right? On one hand, narrow enough to not to disturb the performance too badly of the whole codec. On the other hand, broad enough not to disturb the performance and narrow enough that we can indeed rule out one troll without switching off all the functionality. Yeah, so that's the hard part. And that's the part which 263 didn't get right.
Ben Schwartz. I thought Colin Jennings was going to say this, so I didn't bother. But so Colin Jennings has been speaking in other working groups recently about new architectures for video and real-time media, and has reinvigorated, I think, a discussion about using runtime pluggable software codecs in a web context or in contexts where it might be possible to essentially download a codec along with the video. And if XVC isn't a good fit for Netvc, which is standardizing a codec, it might be still useful for you to participate in other fora here that are considering ways to make standardization of codecs less necessary in order to enable the kind of flexibility that you are offering.
Somebody say living standards. Cool. So I guess the best thing to do next is to take some of the comments which are in the room, go through the minutes maybe. There's a draft. So if people want to continue the discussion, you can reference the draft, read the draft and reference it, and then go and develop from there. Mo, go ahead.
Yeah, so Mo talking from the floor, Mike, again, I had a few more questions. So first about, you mentioned something in the draft that you're in continuous dialogue with patent holders. Do you have a rough feel for whether or not you're going to have enough of those on committing onto the royalty-free baseline terms that the performance would be, at least Thor-like? Do you have a feel for that yet?
No. Well, what I can say is it's kind of a chicken and egg problem, that as long as the feedback that we get is that as long as no one is really using it or there's no commitment to use it, there's not so much interest in committing to make the claims or define the licensing terms for it. So I mean, from the responses that we get so far, is many organizations want to lay low for some time to see where this is going, what's the performance, who is going to use it, and these kind of questions. So I don't have much info on that side.
So from a chair point of view, I think we probably would not make a decision to hum on something that we thought would not meet most of the charter objectives. So unless we had some kind of, rough view of what the likelihood of a performant RF baseline would be, then it would be premature to try to adopt something that we thought was, very unlikely to at least beat Thor once you had the RF picture of it figured out. So is it possible that you may be able to go off and make some headway on that question before the next meeting, or just in general, what time frame do you think? Is it months, years out before you figure out what the RF baseline would look like, or that's something you could do in the pretty short term, months or by the next meeting?
We have some ideas for what it will look like, but the question is, would it really be royalty free? That's the tricky question. We have made some analysis of our own to see what would make a good tool set and what would we believe is a good central piece of technology. But to really have something concrete to say this is royalty free, that's very difficult for my company to bring.
Okay. That's a fair answer. And then the list of technologies and tools, would you say that it currently closely resembles JVET tool sets, or HM plus something totally different?
No, it's a lot of the tools resemble HEVC tools, and several of these tools, which are in addition to HEVC, resemble the JVET tools.
Okay, so
there are some additional tools or alternative things, but it's basic technology is very much on that track.
Okay. Okay. And then the final thing is just a small point, but maybe double check with Steiner about the blip that happened in AV1. Someone was trying to make it faster, and by making it faster, the compression, hit, a horrible cliff. So there was a blip that seemed to be about right about the time when you were doing your evaluation. So maybe double check on the current GitHub hash, maybe from this week.
Okay, we took the best results that were available when we put together our draft. So I think those were not the blip that Steiner presented.
I think the dates might have been close enough that you might have gotten hit by the bug.
No, but we checked that.
Yeah, I think if you heard Steiner in his presentation, he actually went back and checked the commit that they used.
Oh, you did?
And
Okay.
it's 2% worse than the current head of tip, but not
20%.
Not in that huge spike.
Okay, good. No, sorry, I missed that, Steiner. Thanks for verifying that. Okay. Yeah, so to echo Ben's point, I think this is interesting for different reasons, not just for the core technology part of it. Even if the core technology may prove to be, patent encumbered and by people that are unwilling to license it royalty free, some ideas of this may be useful for whatever candidate Netvc pushes forward, and especially the cadence of regular releases may align very well with our charter to put it in WebRTC, because the browsers all have this dynamic cadence, roughly 6 weeks to 12 weeks. If that could be a cadence that a codec publishes on, and there's a reasonable overlap of versions that can be maintained in a browser, not infinite number of versions and not one version back, but at least 1 year's worth of versions, if that can be well contained, that may be a good fit for the update models that the browsers use. And that would be very interesting to have a dynamic codec that revs that fast and is constantly improving. I think that'd be a pretty cool thing to push forward. But the RF question is the big elephant right now. Is what performance can you get when you get this down to RF?
Great. Okay. Any other questions? Cool. Okay. Thank you so much, Jonathan. That's great. Thank you. Okay. That is the end of our agenda for today. Does anyone else have anything else they would like to raise? Brilliant. Okay. If you have not signed the blue sheets, please come up to the front to sign the blue sheets. If you're interested in becoming a chair of this group, please let the current chairs know, myself and Mo or Adam, our AD. I believe you are free to go. Thank you, everyone. Oh, wait. Thank you, Jonathan, for being our Java scribe, and thank you, Matt Miller, for scribing for us. Any way that you want to get the notes to us would be fab. Thanks, guys. Now you can go.
We've already primed the Etherpad with some pre-notes, if you want to just dump them in there.
Wow. I think only this one is needed, because we didn't use that one. But you can take it if you wish.
Yeah, I saw things asking the chairs to sign it. I've never signed the blue sheet.
I just added my name here. Yeah, sorry, you're free.
Are chairs supposed to list their names
for
here?
me. Awesome, thank you. Right.
Do chairs sign this?
I don't think so. I just put it up here.
Okay.
Do you mind taking it over to
Yeah,
security?
I'll take it over.
Okay, cool. All right, let's do this and let's do this.
Everybody got the blue sheets, right? That was it. Anybody else missing?